Good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon, sir.
So today, actually, there was a technical problem. Actually, that is why it took a lot of time to start the meeting. Anyhow, we'll start MEG-6, Block 6. Okay, and Block 6 is about American poetry, Part 2. And the last class we discussed about poetry, also American poetry, and here also some other poets like Robert Frost, Wallace Stevens, William Carlos Williams, okay, Ezra Pound. So very important poets from modern American literature we will try to cover. So coming to Robert Frost, the first important poet Robert Frost is given. He was born in 1874. He is a great American poet. You must have read Robert Frost in your school time because uh, two of his most important poems are like Stepping by Woods in a Snowy Evening and The Road Not Taken. These are very important poems that usually students recite in
Sir, you are no more audible.
What is the problem?
Maybe some network issue
Maybe
is
some
there.
network issue is there.
actually somebody called me regarding this class and that is why I have to take the call. Uh, so those who have problem in joining, you try, go on trying. Because of this problem, we have to keep patience. Anyhow, we were talking about Robert Frost. He was a very well-known poet, I said, from America, and has a great poetic theory also. He is the pioneer of a great poetic theory of his own, and he was born in California, and his family background encouraged him a lot to write poems or poetry, and most of his poems are very philosophical, highly philosophical. If you have read Road Not Taken, this is a very philosophical poem. And Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, the last two lines you must have remembered. Miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. These two lines are also very philosophical in terms of life. So this is something. Uh, okay, so this is about Robert Frost. His father was a journalist. Okay, with some political aspiration, he was a very known journalist, and his mother was also a writer, a poet. His mother was a Scottish, you can say from Scotland, and she wrote a lot of poetries. And from his mother, Frost got introduced to romantic poets like um, uh, romantic poets like Coleridge, Scott, many other Emerson. Many poets got introduced to Robert Frost because of his mother's association with. British literature. After his studies from Harvard, he entered a completely different world. His grandfather left with him a farm where he lived with his family, his wife and children. He went there and he struggled a lot there for existence. Robert Frost struggled hard there, and after many years of hardship, struggling there, and at the same time writing also, he could not find publishers in America to publish his works, and it was a period of depression for Robert Frost, and he thought of committing suicide for the time being. And you may find this particular theme, this particular idea in Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. If you have read that poem, you can understand the idea of committing suicide uh, to prove yourself a complete failure with your fortune, with your destiny, and leaving all the responsibilities, all your promises, commitments unsettled. Uh, Committing suicide is something very cowardice. And at last, he also made up his mind. And you have these beautiful two lines that I said: miles to go before I sleep. That is a contemplation of committing suicide that Robert Frost himself has undergone. You can, if you have read the poem, you can easily understand his state of mind during this period of depression that he underwent. He was also he was also has a lot of important text written at that time, but he could not publish them. Okay. For that reason, he left for England in 1912. He went to England. Okay, there he got his works published easily, immediately. You can say immediately he published his work. One of Rudyard Kipling, you must have heard of the poet. He pointed out that Frost's language sounded strange to English reader. It's a very typical, you can say, Frost, his own specific theory, poetic theory, and this is very peculiar to Frost's poetry, that his language is very strange, you can say. For Frost, it was an advantage. Okay, this language was an advantage because he could write using this his own way of writing. His language had a freshness of a stranger. So if you go through the poems of Robert Frost, you will find the language being different from other contemporary poets, other contemporary poetic works. He inherited most of the themes from Bible, different classics of both Greece and Rome, Roman, Italic. You can say those were full of classical text, classical culture, literary culture. So he inherited a lot of ideas from Bible, from classics, from poetries of Wordsworth, from David Thoreau, from Emerson. So these are the sources of inspiration, you can say, for Robert Frost. Rather than the fine arts of music, fine arts of music that influenced most of the poets like Stevens, Frost. Okay, they were more down to, you can say, Frost was more down to science and philosophy. Okay, he was more dragged towards science and philosophy. He said a poet ought to develop links between sound, sense, and emotion. His own principle is that whatever is being written, okay, so a poet should always try to develop the link, the links which the links between sound, sense, and emotion. These are three important aspects of poetry. Meter is important, but its rigidity uh, should be qualified by the rhythm of actual speech. So he said that meter is important. Meter means the feet. I was talking about when I said about blank verse, free verse in the previous classes. So meter, rhetorical, um, uh, the formula, rhetorical formula to write something in literature, particularly poetry. Even the dramas usually written in iambic pentameter during the days of Shakespeare. So, so that meter, a particular length with some technical logics. Okay, you cannot write any length of writing in poetry, particularly if you are writing in blank verse. So that is why he said meter is important to some extent, but its rigidity is not important. You should not be very much strict to the uh, principle of meters if you are writing poetry, because poetry should be according to the rhythm of your actual speech, original speech, the way you say, the way you talk in your day to day life, according to your original speech, the way you speak, the same kind of lines should be there in poetry. So that will create automatically some rhythms, and whatever meters can be framed out of that, that may be followed. But if you try to stick to the original rules of the meter, suppose you are writing in iambus, so you have to stick to the unstressed and stressed pattern. First syllable of your word should be unstressed. If you do not, if you deviate that, most of the time you cannot argue that your poem is in iambus or it is written in iambus. So iambus is something like that. And we say meter also, pentameter, tetrameter, octameter. So that meter also, again, you, if you are very much conscious of that meter, so you cannot express the actual emotion of your heart in writing, in giving the shape of your emotion through words. So that is
So
why
that
it's
so
necessary.
that
Yes.
implies that Robert was not specific about the topics or the like the formulas or the things which are specific towards the writing of poetry.
Your voice is not clearly audible. Anyhow, Robert, first, it's not about topic, it's about the style of writing. When we are writing a piece of poetry, suppose if you read some ancient poems, you find strict rhythms, the strict rhyming scheme, rhyming pattern. So the first line ended with some sound, means the second line should end with that particular sound. The length of the line should be equal, means with the same equal meters. Okay, so this is something very technical. He says that your line should be like the original, the actual speech spoken by the people. Whether it is according to the meter or not, that is not very important. Okay,
So
this is about.
he stressed on not being technical.
Sorry.
He stressed on not being that technical, but his emotions
Yes, yes,
towards.
yes. Yes, he said that meter is important, but not uh, to that extent that we will focus on only meter and will forget about the actual emotion that is coming out of the poet, the heart of the poet. And if you focus on meter, uh, you lose your emotion, you cannot express what exactly you want to say. That is why free verse is very frequently used nowadays. In modern poetry, you do not find any such metrical measurement in poetry particularly. We do not find, because if you focus on meter, you cannot express whatever you want. You cannot focus, you cannot express. Okay, so Robert Frost said that the rigidity of meters should be avoided, and the rhythm of the actual speech should be taken into account. So when we speak in our usual speech, when we usually talk to our relatives in day to day life, there is also a particular rhythm. If you can find out that rhythm, you can also write a poem using your day to day speech in a piece of writing. By using that, you can also have a great poem. So if you see, if you look at most of his poems by Robert Frost, you can also locate that how they are very simple. If you have gone through his poems, a lot of poems, I said some of his poems are very frequently given in school syllabus. If you have read, you can understand. Otherwise, if you have not gone through his poems, you search for his poems and go through the lines, you can understand that how simple the lines are, but they're philosophically so much complex that you need a very high level philosophical bent of mind in order to understand what exactly he's trying to say. Okay, so now we'll go to the next part. Is important poem which has been prescribed. Two poems are here given, but we'll discuss on only one, the mending wall. Okay, and we try to cover one poems of each of the poets given. So mending wall was published in the second collection, second collection of poems, that is north of Western in 1914. Okay, this is the second collection of books Robert Frost published in 1914. So 1914 is also very important in the age of literature. If you know the relevance of this year, particular year, anyone can say 1914. It is very significant in terms of literature. It changed the concept of literature.
Rabindranath Tagore received the Nobel
Sorry,
Award. I'm not sure.
Rabindranath Tagore.
Yeah, I don't know. It's related to American literature.
No, no, it's not about American literature. It's about literature as a whole. In 1914, First World War began, and two world wars that we find
Oh yes,
in the history of literature, or in the history of the world, you know how much they affect the production of literature, the changing trends in literature. So, First World War started in 1914. You must have the idea, and this year it was published, and you can relate a lot of things related to First World War, connected to First World War, in this poem also. Mending wall. Mending, in simple words, you can understand. What do you mean by mend? When we say mend, what do you mean
To
by
change.
mend? Mend means simply to repair. Mend means to repair. Repair. Mending wall means repairing a wall, you can say. So here the poem is repairing a wall that the poet and the neighbor has in between their gardens. So in order to separate their own lands, there is a wall, boundary wall, you can say boundary wall, which segregates both of their lands, and there is a mark, there is a border line which indicates that from here onwards it belongs to that person, from here to this word, this area, this part belongs to somebody else. So this is a kind of border, you can say, a line which segregates, which separates. So come to the poem later. First, the poem, in this poem, the poet takes a very ordinary incident. This is very common, a very trending feature of which particular age? Can you say? Anyone has any idea? Thus, this particular concept of taking a very ordinary incident.
Modern age.
No, it is the age of romanticism. In the age of romanticism, I was talking in the last previous class also about leaves of grass. There also song of myself I was talking at that time. So taking a very common thing, very ordinary thing, and making it very extraordinary. That is the principle of romantic poems, romantic age. So this poem also we will find in this poem a very ordinary thing. A wall, boundary wall, is the incident related to that. How to build a boundary wall or to repair the wall between human beings, between the human occupation positions. So I have possessed this much land, so you have that land. So in between that, in order to separate, we have a wall. If the wall is now broken, so you know that how walls, these kind of walls are essential nowadays, you know. So whenever you plan a house, building anything, you want a boundary wall. So we know why this is important. So the writer here talks about the necessity of this wall. Okay. Well, his neighbor believes that the neighbor of Robert Frost, the poet or the speaker, he believes that good fences make good neighbors. This is one principle. To some extent, this is very correct. But on the other hand, the writer believes, it means the poet Robert Frost believes that uh, fences, or you can say the boundary walls, has nothing to uh, do with um, uh, our relationship. Okay, he says that the boundary walls, they stop ourselves to be united, to get together, to share our things. So we are separated, we are segregated. In order to live, we need company, we need friends, we need society. And when there is something which separates us, which reminds you that this is yours, that is theirs, so constantly, which gives you the kind of reminder that that place is not yours, you cannot go there. If you go there, that is illegal. If your cow goes outside your garden to another garden, so that is very illegal. So the writer says, Frost says, I have no cows or no animals like that who will go to your garden, and that is why we should build a wall in between our gardens. He said that I have no such intentions, or I have no such animals with me, or anyone that you can expect to destroy your garden. So you need to build a wall in between. So that is not the necessity. If there is no threat from your neighbor that he can come and intrude your garden without your permission and take away something valuable from your garden, then only you can plan of building a boundary in between. But if there is no threat expected from your neighbor, so there is no need of building. So the writer, the poet says that. So why should we build the wall in between? So there is no cow with me. There is no such threats from me which can destroy your garden, which can spoil your garden. Okay, but this is also true to some extent that if we want to live together, so we should not have boundaries at all. So this concept of boundary, you can also relate that how it created a situation for the First World War. This is the same concept. It is in miniature. You can find the concept of this boundary in between two persons is looked, you can see it with the angle in a miniature, that the same situation was created in the world, among the countries, among the states, among the continents. As a result, we found the greatest war ever happened in the history of world. So according to Frost, you can say uh, uh, should be shared. The garden should be shared with trust and mutual understanding. Walls give him a sense of being walled in, captivated, confined, cut off from his immediate environment that he does not enjoy. So this is very true. So if you have wall all around you, you feel like you are a you are inside a jail. You have been caged. you can feel like that. But today we feel very secure if you are inside a boundary wall and tightly locked on the gate, main gate. So we feel we are secure, nobody can intrude, we can enjoy the peace of mind. But that was not actually what the poet intended. The poet says that actually we can enjoy only if we are free to move. Only we are if we are free to move anywhere we want. So now it is not the situation. There are no cows or stray animals from my side, which they can intrude to your garden or the garden of the neighbors. Okay, the the intrinsical distrust, you can say, this is very important. The distrust that human beings have for each other, this is the meaning. The distrust that the human beings have for each other, the suspicions kind of things that we have should be replaced by trust and mutual goodwill. If we replace that suspicion, that doubt, that kind of that distrust, that he might come take away my things. So this is a kind of suspicion we have, because of which we need our properties should be guarded, should be walled up, walled in. Okay. The poem was composed in 1914, I said, and that was the beginning of the World War. The same suspicion and distrust can take place even in a global basis, which led to the historical war. This historical war was also due to this same kind of, I said, uh, in the same kind of suspicion and distrust that we find in the among the countries
Sir,
and continents.
Robert
Sir, Robert
portrays both the
both
thing, na,
the
that
thing, na,
the
that
wall
the
should
wall
be there
should
and
be there
wall
and
shouldn't
wall
be.
shouldn't be.
Actually, the voice is not clearly audible. I don't know the reason.
Sir, I'm
So
just saying,
I'm just
ki,
saying
that
that
he's trying
he's
to
trying to
say both the
say
things,
both
like
the
the
things,
wall
like the
should be there
should
and
be
it
there
shouldn't
and
be
it
there.
shouldn't be there.
You're talking about the wall, boundary wall.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, no, he is not talking about that. He said that there are two ways of interpretation. The two ways. One way, the one aspect of interpretation we find from the neighbor's point of view, and another from the poet's point of view. The poet says the need of the wall and how it restricts your restricts your freedom, how it creates a kind of atmosphere where you are confined, how it restricts your social movement. You cannot move out of your society because you are confined, caged. Okay, on the other hand, the neighbor thinks that good fences make good neighbors, because if fences are there, if boundary walls are there, so you can avoid easily the unnecessary troubles that might come up. Suppose something will happen due to the open, your garden is open and somebody will come, enter, and do something to your garden. So there may be some kind of unnecessary disputes. So if walls are there, so you can easily avoid, you can easily get rid of all these unnecessary disputes. So that is why the other means the neighbor said that good fences make good neighbors. But the poet does not talk about becoming neighbors. He says we all are same, we are enjoying in the same society, we are living in the same society. There should not be boundaries in the in every individual, around every individual. It restricts your freedom, it restricts your social values, social openness. Okay, so this is you can have two points of view, and you can analyze from your point of view who is correct to what extent. Okay, who is
Oh,
uh,
sir.
okay, this is to up to you. This is a poem that nothing will be clear, so you have to take your own point of view at the end of the poem. After analysis you can have your own point of view. So
Just like
Just
that of
like that of
okay, so Frost uses rhythms of the speaking voice and his understated style. His poetry evolved a new voice for modern poetry. I just talked at the beginning the same point that his rhythms are very strange. His lines, his poetic techniques are very strange. He has a separate poetic theory. Okay, Robert Frost is. That is also a very huge matter for discussion that will take several classes if we go on discussing his poetic theory. Okay, his poetry sounds effortless. It's very important. His poetry sounds very effortless, as if you are reading without any stress, without any difficulty to understand. You go on reading. So I said, I suggest you go through some of his poems, important poems. You can understand. You go effortlessly reading and understanding the lines, the poetic poetic themes, whatever he has used without excessive ornaments. You do not find excessive ornaments, excessive use of figures of speech, with excessive deliberate use of a lot of you find a lot of poets who deliberately uses a lot of particularly if you talk about Renaissance poetry and after that metaphysical poetry. If you read metaphysical poetry, you are supposed to have a lot of figures of speech, particularly paradox, irony, and a lot of other uh, figures of speech that will make your going very difficult. You cannot go easily. Okay, that is why it is said that Robert Frost has a different poetic technique, and if you go through his poems, you can go easily without any effort. You can easily go through his lines and understand, and with some of the qualities of prose also. Okay, his style is meditative, so you have to go along with meditation. You have to meditate over the points that he reveals line after line, and accordingly you can understand how he is able to reveal everything in a very easier manner, and with the difficult level of philosophical ideology can be easily expressed, can be easily understood from his poems. So he discusses the distance and tension between. This is very important also. Okay, uh, distance and tension. There is always distance and tension between the lines, between them. He considers the contradictions in life and humanity and within the human beings. So all these contradictions, we find contradictions at the beginning of the poem, that the poet and the neighbor, his neighbor, they have contradictions regarding the repairing of that wall, the boundary wall. Okay, so contradiction is always there in the mind of the people, in the life of the people, in the humanity, and within the human beings themselves. So you will find contradictions, and contradictions mending the wall both unites and separates the both. This contradiction is also very important if you look at in a different angle, with a different point of view, you can understand. So mending the wall, also mending or repairing the wall, unites them and separates them at the same time. Okay, so if you go for repairing, so both the neighbor and the poet will go and work together, because this boundary wall belongs to both of them. So in order to repair, they will unite, then only they can repair. So after repairing, when they leave that particular place and live in their respective houses, they become separated. So the wall both unites and separates them. These are the contradictions. If you go through the poem, you can understand. So we do not have much time to discuss more about poems of Robert Frost, because every single poem of Robert Frost will invite hours of discussion. Still, you cannot satisfy your queries for understanding poems of Robert Frost. So Better you go through the text, try to understand. So the contradiction, the paradoxes, whatever you will find, you can understand how great a poet Robert Frost was. Okay, so now coming to another poet, he is Wallace Stevens. Okay, another poet, Wallace Stevens. He was born in Reading in the year 1879 in Pennsylvania. Okay, educated in Harvard and in New England in a law school. Spent most of his life as an executive in an insurance company. Okay, he is also a prolific writer, got Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1955, a prestigious American award for literature. You must have the idea. Okay, and we are talking about a poem by Wallace Stevens, that is Sunday Morning. Again, this is also, all the modern poems are thought provoking. You have a lot of philosophies, a lot of themes, a lot of ideas replete with the poems, replete with the with each and every lines words of the poem. So you need to go through the text and try to understand, and only discussion without going through the text may be a bit difficult, but better if you have gone through the text earlier. Sunday Morning is also very interesting poem by Stevens, published in 1915. Okay, in the published in part. Okay, in episodes. It was first published in 1915. Issues of poetry. Okay, and then in 1923, this poem was completely published in an anthology, Harmonium. Okay, a collection by Stevens. It was published in Harmonium, was a poetry collection by Stevens, was published in 1923, and this poem Sunday Morning was complete. A complete poem was published with the collection. This poem has 8 stanzas in the uh, um, 8 stanzas, 15 lines each. In each stanza we have 15 lines, and there are total 8 stanzas and written in blank verse. Okay, so again blank verse concept came, so I'm not going to repeat. About this poem, Stevens wrote that it was simply an expression of paganism. Okay, this is a simple expression of paganism. So paganism means it is in opposition to Christianity or religion, you can say. Okay, paganism is an opposition to Christianity. So in Christianity, we keep God at the center, but in paganism, they keep nature in the center, or you can say sun in the center. Okay, sun is the is considered to be the head, the very important part of nature, and that is why they do not worship God. They solely depend on nature. Nature is everything for them. So here we find this poem is interesting. Is a simple you say that this is an expression of paganism. We'll find the poem is a search for a systematic truth that could replace the Christianity of his, you can say, of his church going childhood. So you will find this is a line by the poet himself. It is a systematic truth that could, this is a search for a systematic truth. Okay, this poem is a search for a truth, systematic truth that could replace Christianity. So we'll find that in the summary part of the poem, that the summary goes like this: a woman, particularly, prefers not going to the church on Sunday morning. On a Sunday morning, actually, Sunday morning is a very auspicious time for the Christians to go to the church and pray Jesus Christ. So everybody is expected to go to the church and worship Jesus Christ. That is something everybody does in Christianity. But now here you find that the woman is not going to the church, rather sitting in front of her house, was enjoying in the lap of nature, was enjoying the beauty of nature. So this is a kind of boycott, you can say. That is why the poet says this is an expression of paganism, because the religious ideology is to some extent the poet, the woman in the voice of the poet is trying to avoid. Okay, so while enjoying the beauty of nature, the voices of the birds, and you will find the pigeons, many other birds, the trees, while enjoying them, she dreamed of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, or you can say the death of Jesus Christ, which was a guilt. If you think about that God was dying or God is dying, so she dreamt of, it's symbolical of the pagan world, the people of the pagans particularly. If you say, they think about that, they do not believe in God. They think that God is means nature is everything to them. In the very ancient time, at the beginning of the civilization, people do not have any idea about what God is. They worshipped trees, they worshipped the sun, they worship water, because they find all the abilities, they find the most powerful things which control them, which control all their activities. So they should be considered to be powerful, hence they should be worshipped. So that is why you find the skeptical woman who does not like to visit the church, does not like to worship Jesus Christ. She does not want to give up the pleasure, okay, in return, in exchange of going to the church and worshiping the Christian God. Okay? That is something very necessary, that in order to live in an organized society which relies on religious activities, religious tradition. So you have to go to the church. But here, the women finds more pleasure in the lap of nature, so she did not prefer to go. The woman finds peace in the sight of words. They are waking up, they are walking around, and they are taking up flights. All these activities of nature attracts her the most, and she finds peace in this in the sights of all these things. Okay, birds stand in for freedom. Birds, they symbolize freedom. So in a religious point of view, you are not free. You are guided through a lot of religious principles, that you are supposed to do something that you do not actually wish. Your heart, your mind does not want to do. So religion, you can say, altogether, it limits your freedom. So here the woman finds happiness in nature, so that is why she does not go to the church. They also feature in the final lines of the poem, flying onwards to death. So you will find that the birds, or particularly the pigeons, we find they are flying towards the infinite. We do not see them again. That means that is death. So so the theme of happiness is more important here. The poem begins with the woman's happiness. The woman is very happy. Okay, the speaker delves into the discussion of paradise and its similarities. Okay, paradise and its similarities and differences to the life of the common people, the human beings on earth. So whatever the concept of paradise we have, we created the concept of paradise, must be better, a better place from here. So here the poet thinks that the concept of paradise is completely a framework of the human minds. It is not something really exist. We do not have proofs that this kind of paradise, heavens that we say God, that really they exist somewhere in the space. We do not know, we do not have any proof, simply we believe, we think. Okay, so that is why it is said that the paradise and the similarities, differences that we find uh, to the life on earth is a matter of discussion here. So whatever you see here, whatever kind of natural elements that gives you pleasure, you can enjoy paradise here also. So paradise, whatever the concept of paradise mentioned in literature or mythology, we do not have any idea. We have never seen. Okay. Some of the painters, some of the authors, they have written, they have painted a paradise which might be a product of human mind, which is the product of human thought, but we do not know whether that exists. But the writer says, the poet says that here only in the earth itself you can enjoy the paradise. Okay. So the pagans action worshipping sun, that is also another important point. The pagans, they love to worship the sun. The sun is the central part of the nature, the environment we live. The nature is everything for the pagans. Okay. The woman keeps encroaching on her consciousness with the religious significance of Sunday morning. Okay. So there is two concepts. One is the religious significance. The religious significance means you need to go to the church, and you have to go to the church, and you have to perform the kind of worship that everybody does there, and that is a kind of relevance of the Sunday. Okay. And another way of enjoying Sunday is to surrender yourself and completely mingle in the lap of nature, and you can enjoy something different. So there are two kind of significance of enjoying a Sunday. And the woman prefers to be in the lap of nature. The sun is the most prominent image in this poem. We find that the sun to be most prominent image, which shines on the woman on her Sunday morning and represents comfort and peace. Okay, the sun here is very much important. Sun is also later you will find used as a symbol of beauty. Okay, symbol of beauty, okay, for Christians. There is a contrast between Christianity and paganism, which is presented at the end. Okay, there is a contrast. So the pagans, they love to spend the Sunday morning in the lap of nature, while the Christians, they prefer to enjoy the company of Jesus Christ in the church, and they want to spend the time like that. Not these points, we can have more other discussions how Christians and the pagans, they vary in their concept of religion. Okay, when we talk about their religion, there is always a contradiction. The poem discusses an interaction between nature and humanity. Okay, throughout the poem we find that there is an interaction between nature and humanity. Human beings, we know, when we respect the voices of romanticism or romantic poets, we find that nature is more prominent to any god. Those mythology has given us mythology of the world. We find in every mythology different gods have been given to us. We have many gods in our religion. We have countless gods. Okay, so these gods, in comparison to nature, we find nature being very prominent. When we talk about God, what we see, nature is something we can see, we can feel. Okay, to the mankind, nature symbolizes both paradise and death. Okay, that is the truth. The truth is that we are born here out of the natural elements and will die also here. The birth and death is two very important truth of life, you can say. And here also, nature symbolizes both. The speaker brings up images of nature associated with religion, and finally, nature's independence. Okay, nature is independent. Whatever religion you find on the surface of earth, you have many religions. We know very important religions: Christianity, Hinduism, Islamic. We know a lot of religions on the earth, and these religions, they are posed in contrast with nature also here. And nature's independence is always there. Nature is beyond the concept of religion. Nature is something different. Okay, so this is about the Sunday morning in brief. So now we'll shift to another poem by William Carlos William. This is a very important poem also. So much depends on a red wheelbarrow, a poem. You must have gone through the poem. I know, I think, but it's a very small poem. Okay, of poem of one sentence. It is written in one sentence. There are only 16 words and 8 lines. 8 lines, 16 words. You can imagine 2 lines in a word, and so much depends on a red wheelbarrow. Is a very well-known poem in American literature. Very short poem. You can say that shortest of poems, but it has drawn a lot of criticism in the history of literature. You'll find this poem being very small, but originally it has a lot of criticism. Okay. You find the image, uh, the image of the wheelbarrow, a red wheelbarrow and white chickens. Okay, there was rain, and we find the wet wheelbarrow is lying, and some chicken, small white chicken, they are beside the wheelbarrow. That is the image as a whole, and the poem is about that also. It's a portrait kind of poem. You will find a portraiture of a picture, a painting of a picture, the wheelbarrow and the chicken. The poem was by William Carlos William. It was published in um, 1923. Okay, and the 22nd work of William Carlos William, in the book Spring and All. Okay, Spring and All is a book in which this poem got published. Okay, uh, it was written in free verse. Okay, free verse. Uh, the prime example of early 20th century imagism you will find in this poem. Imagism. So importance to be given on image. Image is very important. You will find the poet has given all the clues to make it a concrete image. You can easily, after reading the poem, if you read it carefully, so after reading, if you close the eyes, you can visualize all the pictures, the entire image that the scene the poet has created through the poem. Okay, so the poem, I said, it is in a single sentence, 16 words, 8 lines, but generated more commentary than any other longer poems of 20th century. Wheelbarrow, chicken are the symbols of agriculture, center of the life in rural areas. You can say wheelbarrow is used for agricultural purposes. The chicken, you can say also they are related to poultry, which is also connected to rural agricultural industries. So they talk about the agricultural field of the rural areas. The colors of the wheelbarrow is red, so that is also symbolic. So red is the color of blood, you can say, is the color of energy. So we find that the essence of life is there in the wheelbarrow. The wheelbarrow is something depend the total community, the people that depend on that. If they have the wheelbarrow, using the wheelbarrow, they perform all their activities related to this agriculture, and that is why this is very important. This is named. This is colored as red. By focusing the image of the wheelbarrow, the poet shifts the attention from the image to the relationship of human beings with nature. So you can also find the images of the wheelbarrow, the chicken can also drag you to the point that you can find the relationship of human beings with nature once again. Okay, the sentimental meditation on the use of common objects. Again, you will find the same thing that we find in the last poem discussed in the um, uh, mending wall. By first, we find a very common incident. Here also you find a very common thing. So the wheelbarrow is most ignored, most often ignored. Uh, you must not have seen a wheelbarrow very often, but whatever you are watching every day or while coming, it may be a thela or like that. So you come across every day when you are passing on the road. So you have never thought of looking at them very minutely. You have never tried to look at them very closely. Here, the same kind of thing, you will find the writer has given the picture in such a way, the image is presented in such a way you can visualize the thing. So you can find that a meditation, a sentimental meditation, you can also find here in order to understand how the common object is connected to the human life, the human nature. The value of a common or simple item, that is the wheelbarrow, is rarely noticed by the people. I said people do not care about the existence of such common, such ordinary items. We think it's very simple, very ordinary. What is there new or what is most valuable about this that we should look at this carefully? Will waste our time. We think, but there is something very special, and this is only the poetic imagination which can prove that by using words, very limited words, the poet has given a very true picture of the wheelbarrow in this poem. The poets reframing the image forces the reader to look at the image closely. Okay, and so the color, the rain and the water. Okay, and the chicken, the color of the chicken, the surrounding. So everything is narrated in such a way you cannot stop looking at or visualizing the picture in your mind. Though it's not present, it's written, it is painted, portrayed in words, using words. But if you try to close your eyes after having understood the poem, you can visualize, I said. So this is a very important poem in American literature, mostly prescribed for undergraduate or postgraduate students. So go through the text. It's very simple. You must have seen. Uh, and so much depends on a red wheelbarrow. It's a very short poem, very short poem. So you can read through it. You go and read and analyze it, and you can understand. This is also very important. So we could cover three poems, and some of other poems were also important left. Anyhow, we'll stop now. It's already time for the next class to start. Mm, sorry. So those who are going to join MEG 8, you may join. So now we have to stop. Anybody has any question, if you can ask. Otherwise, we have to stop.
So, which all poems we doing the in the next session?
Sorry.
Which all poems will be covering in the next session?
In the next class. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
In the next class, I think poetry is over now. In the next block, we have short stories, I think. Short stories.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So you see the syllabus, block 7. We'll start block 7 in the next class. And in block 7, you have short stories. It is better if you go through the text before coming to the class. So I said, you can understand better, you can have better clarity. Okay, thank you all. If you have anyone has any other questions, please you can ask. Otherwise, I'll start. Okay, then thank you all. We'll see you in the next class.